have you with us. It seems the high-level North Korea-U.S. talks have been delayed once again. It was expected to take place this week, but with no word from Pyongyang and with U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo set to depart with President Trump for the G20 summit in Argentina on Thursday, it has all but been confirmed that it won't be happening. We'll look at what this means for negotiations with North Korea and whether it will ever happen later in the newscast. But first, let's get the latest headlines by turning to Devin Whiting at the News Center. Devin?
Hi, Jung. South Korean President Jae-in is leaving on an 8-day trip around the world to attend some major summits. He's going to the Czech Republic, Argentina, and New Zealand. In Argentina specifically, it's the G20 summit and possibly a one-on-one meeting with President Trump. Our Blue House correspondent Shin Se-min has a preview of this marathon trip.
President Moon Jae-in's last overseas trip of 2018 will take him around the world. For 2 days, starting Tuesday the 27th, the president will be making his first stop in Prague, the capital of Czech Republic, where one goal is to help South Korea win a contract to build a nuclear power plant. And from the 29th until the 1st of December, President Moon will be in Argentina for the Group of 20 summit, taking place under the theme of building consensus for fair and sustainable development. For the final 3 days, President Moon will be in New Zealand on a state visit, the first by a South Korean leader in 9 years, during which he will discuss ways to create synergy between his new Southern policy and the island nation's so-called Pacific reset. Plenty of diplomacy on the sidelines of the G20 as well. President Moon will meet with the leaders of South Africa and the Netherlands, both of which are non-permanent members of the UN Security Council. The Netherlands is also on the North Korea Sanctions Committee, which could help in getting more penalties on the regime lifted. And the high-stakes meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump, still no plans confirmed yet. The South Korean presidential office says it depends on the receptive leaders' schedules and will be confirmed during the G20 meetings. The top office says the president's last overseas trip of the year will be a chance to widen his scope of foreign diplomacy while pushing for lasting peace on the Korean Peninsula and sharing with the world's economic powers his administration's vision of what makes an inclusive nation. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
The UN Security Council Sanctions Committee on North Korea has reportedly confirmed that it has approved a waiver on the sanctions so the two Koreas can inspect their railways together. Voice of America reported on Tuesday, citing a committee official from the Netherlands, that the waiver was granted through a written procedure, but that there are no plans to disclose the relevant documents. Meanwhile, Seoul's Unification Ministry says it proposed a schedule for the inspections to Pyongyang through the Joint Liaison Office on Monday, but has yet to get a response. Seoul says the inspections could start as early as this week, and it's reportedly consulting with the UN command on the details. The head of the U.S. Army Pacific Command, General Robert Brown, has revealed that while military exercises by South Korea and the U.S. have been reduced in size and scope on the Korean Peninsula, they have been conducting higher-level drills elsewhere. In an interview with Defense News published on Monday, General Brown said the U.S. recently held drills in Hawaii and Alaska in which South Korean troops took part. Brown had been asked in the interview what the U.S. Army is doing to offset the Allies' suspension of drills in South Korea as part of easing tensions with the North. The economic slowdown in South Korea is apparently affecting overall consumer confidence. The latest numbers show Korean consumers haven't felt this negatively about the local economy since February of last year. Go Jun-hee reports.
South Korea's consumer confidence slumped to a 21th-month low in November. Ongoing concerns over the slowing domestic economy and the trade war between the United States and China. According to the Bank of Korea on Tuesday, its composite consumer sentiment index was at 96 points, down 3.5 points from October. A reading below 100 indicates they're more pessimists than optimists about the economy. The index has been falling for 2 consecutive months after a rebound in September. November's figures is as low as the period when former President Park Geun-hye was removed from power early last year on corruption and other charges. However, the central bank said it's relatively hard to directly compare figures for the periods before and after September, as it changed the household samples for the survey last month. As for what's at the root of the low sentiment, the Bank of Korea says consumers are worried the local economy is slowing down due to trade tensions between the United States and China. Washington is set to raise tariffs on $200 billion worth of Chinese imports to 25% from 10% in January. If Presidents Trump and Xi fail to reach an agreement at the upcoming G20 meeting in Argentina. The OECD warned last week that the trade spat could knock as much as 0.8% off global GDP by 2021. Sluggish job data was another factor. According to Statistics Korea, South Korea's overall unemployment rate was 3.5% last month, the highest figure for the month of October since 2005. The Bank of Korea also said plunging stock prices affected overall consumer confidence. October was a brutal month for local stocks, with the benchmark Kospi tumbling by almost 14%, its largest all-month decline since 2008. Korea, Arirang News.
The 6th OECD World Forum, organized jointly by the OECD and Statistics Korea, has opened in South Korea's western port city of Incheon. Around 3,000 policymakers, academics, and business leaders from more than 100 countries will be holding discussions this week on the theme, The Future of Well-Being. They'll explore how big business and trends like digitalization could affect people's well-being and ways the public and private sectors can make growth more inclusive and improve people's livelihoods in general. Participants include South Korea's Finance Minister Kim Dong-yeon, OECD Secretary General Angel Gurria, and world-renowned economist Jeffrey Sachs. The forum will run through Thursday. And the International Labor Organization has released its biannual Global Wage Report. Among other things, it shows wages around the world rising at a worryingly slow pace. Hong Yu reports.
The global economy has been on a steady recovery path since the financial crisis in 2008. This according to a Monday report by the International Labor Organization. Along with global growth, the world unemployment rate has decreased compared to the year 2016. Yet global wage growth in 2017 fell to 1.8%, its lowest ever since the 2008 financial crisis. The ILO's Global Wage Report, based on data collected from 136 countries, showed a 0.6 percentage point decrease in global wage last year compared to 2016. But the wage picture is even gloomier without China, a country which is experiencing rapid economic growth, with global wage growth seen at a mere 1.1% when China is excluded. The reports also show that female workers are being paid about 20% less on average than men for work of equal value around the world.
In high-income countries, the gender pay gap tends to be higher among top income earners, reflecting to some extent, I think, the phenomenon of the glass ceiling, whereas in emerging and developing countries, the gap tends to be much greater at the bottom end of the wage scale.
One key factor in the gender wage gap was motherhood, meaning those with children earned less than those who were not mothers. But the gender disparity in wages were also seen among those who hadn't reached motherhood as well. Thus, the report suggests a need to combat stereotypes and gender discrimination in the labor market in order to achieve social justice for women. Hong Yu, Arirang News.
I'm Devin Whiting, and those are your news headlines.
There have been speculation that high-level talks between North Korea and the US would take place this week. But the week came and still no word, meaning the meeting could now be delayed until at least December. Park Hee-jun has this report.
The high-level talks between U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and his North Korean counterpart Kim Yong-chol to discuss details of the next Kim-Trump summit and the North denuclearization may end up taking place next month. The originally planned November 8th meeting was delayed right after the U.S. midterm elections. There had been rumors that Washington was looking to arrange the meeting in New York early this week, but it looks like it will be delayed again over the North's failure to respond. The U.S. has been trying to bring North Korea back to the negotiating table by supporting a joint study of the Inter-Korean Railway project and by granting the necessary sanctions waivers. It also recently announced that its annual South Korea-U.S. joint military exercise will be scaled down next year. But still, no answer from the North.
North Korea still holds on to the original plan or strategy to go directly to the very top level of the Trump administration, which is President Trump himself, rather than going through the regular channels of the diplomacy in order to materialize the main agreements both governments agreed in Singapore in June.
The continued setbacks are expected to cause a delay not only in the second Kim-Trump summit slated for early next year, but also on talks to formally end the Korean War and North Korean leader Kim's proposed visit to Seoul. The Seoul government had been hoping to achieve both of these goals within the year. The impasse between Pyongyang and Washington could be broken, depending on the discussions among the heads of regional powers during the upcoming G20 summits. There are also hopes that if President Moon Jae-in sits down with President Trump, he could secure a breakthrough in the nuclear negotiations. Park Ki-jun, Arirang News.
Now, for more on these latest developments, we have with us Dr Jung, a research fellow from the Sejong Institute in Seoul. It's good to have you back on the show.
Thank you for having me today.
So, previous speculation was that the Pompeo Kim Young-chol meeting would take place this week, but it now seems it's not happening. I mean, what do we know so far, and are you surprised at all by this development?
So, as you just said, it was a rumor that when they had planned to have a meeting on November 8th, as we all know that the Secretary Pompeo mentioned about the possibility of having meetings with his counterpart, like week and a half later or next week. So he kept mentioning about the possible timing of the meetings. But this time, no government officials in either country has ever mentioned about the possibility of a meeting this week. So I think it was basically a rumor that the Secretary Pompeo and the Kim Young-chol is going to meet this week. So now we don't know yet what was the reason in the first place that their first meeting was canceled on November 8th. Even though the official reason was because of the schedule conflict, but we don't know yet what exactly is the reason behind it. So we have to see what is there that makes it difficult for them to meet again. And as you mentioned, that now it's going to be December if the meeting is going to take place. So we have to see whether they can meet in early December or not.
I mean, it is quite frustrating for those people, for us on the sidelines, to be watching this, because we really don't know why North Korea seems to be delaying and postponing this meeting. I mean, in that last report, Dr. Bong, who's also a regular on this show as well, he suggested that North Korea don't want talks with Pompeo and they want direct talks with President Trump himself. Do you agree with that sentiment, and do you think that's even realistic?
So for North Korea to have a summit between President Trump and the Chairman Kim, that they knew that they have to go through Secretary Pompeo. But the problem is that now the approach by the United States is different from how they approached it in the early half of this year. In the early half of this year, the U.S. approach was like that it is meaningful to have a summit no matter what. But after the first summit, that now U.S. government think that it is necessary to have a working level talks to have a fruitful summit and to make a good result out of the summit. So now U.S. government demanded North Korea to accept that working level talks should be going ahead before summit taking place. So probably U.S. is demanding North Korea to accept that U.S. approach, while North Korea, as Dr. Bong mentioned, that while North Korea prefers to have summit instead of working level talks, that is why two sides has not reconciled their differences yet. I think that might be the reason why it's difficult for them to agree on the date for the high-level talks.
while they have this impasse, before they can't seem to sort out how they're going to get to this next level of talks. I mean, the concern is they can't reach some sort of agreement over the denuclearization. I mean, if they can't reach any sort of deal through denuclearization, that means North Korea is still producing its nuclear weapons and continuing its nuclear program. Should we be concerned at the fact that there is no progress so far?
So the reason why U.S. government raised the concerns of having a summit, a second summit this time, was that because in the first summit, they fixed the date first, and then working level negotiation follow after the date was fixed. So even if North Korea did not comply with the U.S. demand in the working level talks, the summit is going to take place anyway. So now the U.S. approach is that they have to develop a meaningful progress at the working level talks. So the second summit should be the kind of like ceremony that delivers the fruitful outcome of the negotiations. So now North Korea believes that a summit might be the best way for them to achieve their own interest, while now the Secretary Pompeo and the U.S. government believes that the working level negotiation should go first before the summit. So I think that if they agree on to have working level negotiations before the summit, then I believe that there was some progress between North Korea and the United States with regard to the denuclearization negotiations.
There's been a couple of developments over the last couple of weeks. So, for example, the US and the international community has allowed the inspections of the Incheon railway project to go ahead, and offering special waivers on the North Korean sanctions as well while they're at it. The US then also last week as well promised it would scale down its annual military drills in the spring, the Fall Eagle exercises, and scale it down, to help diplomatic negotiations as well. These all seem like concessions that the US and the international community are making to the North Korea to possibly try to get them back to the negotiating table. But North Korea don't seem to be interested. Do you think it's not enough for North Korea?
So first, with regard to the military exercises, President Trump mentioned after the summit June this year that while the talks continues, he's going to suspend all the military exercises. So I think that the reason why the Secretary of Defense mentioned about scaling down, it's different from suspension of the military drills. So scale down still means that there's going to be a military drills, but suspension means that there would be temporarily no military drills between US and South Korean military. So I think that it's both a carrot and a stick, that unless North Korea is cooperating with the United States, there's a room for United States to maneuver, so they can actually resume the military drills again. So it can be a pressure to North Korea at the same time that since Secretary Mattis mentioned that there's a possibility of suspension, so it also can be a carrot. And for the waiver of the UN Security Council, that it exempt sanctions from the survey of the railroad project. It does not mean that we get comprehensive exemption from the UN Security Council with regard to the railroad project. So now we have a working group between South Korea and the United States with regard to the possible violation of sanctions and the North and South economic project. This is the one good example that South Korea and the U.S. can talk before any negative things can happen between two allies. And at the same time that there might be some limitations that U.S. put on while they agree to give exemptions to the sanctions. So I think we have to see, but from the North Korean side that it is still unclear what makes it very difficult for North Korea to come to the discussion again with the United States.
By having these talks delayed, it seems to delay everything else as well. There's a knock-on effect, a domino effect to the other talks. For example, the US North Korea summit between Kim and Trump, as well as other inter-Korean projects as well, such as the possible Kim Jong-un's visit to Seoul as well, which they promised back in September. I mean, so these knock-on effects, I mean, are we going to see a delay in all these future negotiations and events?
So when our president and the Chairman Kim agreed that Chairman Kim was going to visit Seoul within this year, they said that in September Pyongyang summit. And the reason why they could announce that Kim Jong-un would visit Seoul within this year was that there was some prospect of progress between U.S. and North Korea. But as the progress is not actually happening, everything is very difficult to move ahead. So I think that for Chairman Kim to come to Seoul, he needs to get something out of the trip to show his people in North Korea. But without any progress with the United States, he cannot get any sanctions relief or the easing the sanctions, or there's no progress in terms of a declaration of end to Korean War or like peace treaty. So even if Chairman Kim can visit South Korea, there is nothing tangible for him to get out of his trip. So I think that the North Korea and the U.S. negotiation it's not the prerequisite for the Kim Jong-un's trip to Seoul, but it has very important role in making these summit between two Koreas and the visit by Kim Jong-un to Seoul possible. So I think that we have to see about like 1 to 3 weeks what kind of progress can be made between U.S. and North Korea.
We can pretty much calculate that Pompeo won't be holding this meeting because we know he's going to Argentina with President Trump for the G20 summit. And of course, also there will be President Moon Jae-in of South Korea. Now, there is a talk that President Moon could meet with President Trump as a sideline summit to the G20 as well. Do you think it'll happen? And do you think they have enough to talk about on North Korea?
So the first problem is that President Trump probably is going to stay there less than 20 hours. And the G20 is different from UN Security Council meetings and UN General Assembly meetings. The G20 is more about economy of US and other advanced economies in the world. And they are now going through a lot of troubles with regard to trade and the economic systems. So maybe other countries are trying to gang up against President Trump about US trade policies. So I think that President Trump had to deal with them first at G20. So I don't know whether he can find some time to meet with our president this time and even talk about North Korean issues in depth. So I think that our government is trying to meet many leaders on the sidelines of this G20, but the purpose of the meeting at G20 is very different. So I think there's certain limitations that we have to acknowledge.
Yes, there's a lot of things on President Trump's plate for this G20 summit. There are talks that he will be meeting with President Putin and President Xi Jinping of China. And of course, he has many things to talk to them about. But do you think he will make time to possibly discuss North Korea? Or do you think that will have to take a backseat this time?
So if he could find some time to meet our president, he probably knows that the North Korea should be the main issue between President Moon and him. So I think that if there's some time that he can squeeze in his schedule, then I think that he's going to discuss with the President Moon about North Korean issues, and President Moon can take advantage of that opportunity to pursue President Trump that the second summit between Trump and Kim is very important in terms of the denuclearization negotiation with North Korea.
But what about, do you think, with Trump and Xi Jinping and Putin, do you think North Korea will come up there at all?
I think that with China, the trade issue is so urgent between two countries, and Trump administration is announcing that its tariff policy against China and its it's urging China to change its policy with its trade to the United States. So I think that the trade policy is the main issue for U.S. to talk with China. And with Russia, there are a lot of things that Trump government already have troubles with Russia, including its INF treaty about the security issues. So I think that they can discuss some part of North Korean issues, but again, the time is so limited this time, so I think that it cannot be a extended discussion among the leaders this time.
Yes, I think timing for the North Korea issue might not be best, but we'll have to see whether this high-level talks between Pompeo and Kim Young-chul happen next month, or whether it be delayed further. Anyway, that's what we have time for. Thank you for your time and your take on all these latest developments.
Thank you very much.
And that's it from myself, but do tune in to our later newscasts for the latest updates from Korea and around the world. Thank you for watching and hope you can join us again next time. Goodbye.